screen right now. For some reason,
Good morning, everybody. We may not be able to hear Lauren right now. And if anything happens and we disappear suddenly, let's say happy 4th of July and we'll redo this one. Lauren, at where she's at the college, they just put in brand new Wi-Fi and we know how that goes. So I'm going to chat for a little bit to see if maybe Lauren's going to take in and do the intro. If not, we will just take off and you guys can do the intro in your head. Lauren, how are you doing? Are you there?
can you all
Okay,
put it
so
in the
Lauren, I
chat
can't
if whether
really
or not you can hear me?
Yeah, I can't hear you too well, Lauren. You're kind of going in and out. So I'll give you a couple minutes here. And if not, we'll just start. Like I told Lauren, I said, we cannot be responsible for all technology being perfect. So we're going to say, everybody in the audience, we all agree we can't be perfect. We're going to use this as an example to just take a breath and go with the flow. So Lauren, you give me a clue. Do you want me to just go ahead and get started? Oh, yep. So she's going to possibly come in from another channel, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. That gives Lauren a chance to get going here. Yes, go with the flow. You're absolutely right. I have been on this mission to actually live and breathe that way of being. So I'm going to get started and you guys go ahead and in your mind sing the Lauren introduction because I know you guys all know that by heart. Okay, so today I am going to continue with my Mythbusters. And where I come up with these Mythbusters is a lot of what I'm hearing on my one-on-ones. And I've been hearing this a lot lately. Many of you are probably aware of this, but I just want to mention it so you don't get caught in the trap that I'm having others get caught in. My sentence, and then I'll explain what I mean. If I'm not doing any business, then my company can be considered closed. Now, what I have happen is people form an LLC or an S Corp, but I'm seeing it a lot with an LLC, but it's true of both, okay? But they form the LLC and then they don't do any business as they see it. So they say, well, I really didn't do anything with it. It's just sitting on the side. And that's the language that they're using, many different words, but kind of meaning the same thing. And so what I always have to explain is that forming a corporation, like I said, an LLC and S Corp, but it's mostly I hear people do this with LLC. When you form a corporation, think of it kind of like a marriage. Can you see somebody saying, well, I'm getting married again. I didn't file for a divorce, but we're really not doing anything together anyway, so we're not really married? No, they would say, hey, the state still sees you legally married, so you're married. I know that's a weird analogy, guys, but I want you to follow the exact same analogy because that's how it is. When you open a corporation, it is technically opened independent of you doing any transactions until you file dissolution documents and close it and close your business license, your selling permit, and any other aspects you have. But legally, you must file dissolution documents. Now, here is where it gets complicated. And let's say LLC for a second. Say you start your LLC and you don't properly file dissolution documents. Well, in the state's eye, your company is still open. You are still responsible for the $800 per year franchise tax fee. Now, if you don't pay it, then what happens is your company gets suspended. So this is the trick, guys. You cannot file dissolution documents until you pay past taxes. So if you have the 800 plus you have any penalties, you will still incur additional penalties and fees until you file the dissolution, but you can't file the dissolution till you're paid in full. You can see it starts a circular situation. So you really have to make sure if you start a corporation, you properly dissolved it. And you can always go on the government website and see if it's active or suspended. And I'll possibly show you that when we come back after the holiday. I'll show you how to do that. In fact, I will, so you understand that. Now, The other aspect that you want to consider is filing tax returns. On an LLC, and it's a key word here, you will not have to file a tax return if there are no transactions. Notice I didn't say no sales, no profit. I said transactions. A transaction is any kind of monetary exchange. You pay a bill, you get revenue, but if you pay a bill, that's a transaction, right? And that will end up being a loss that you can take against your taxes and possibly get a refund. So a lot of times people go, well, I really didn't make any money, so I didn't file a tax return. No, that's not true. An LLC must still file a tax return as long as they're a transaction. An S Corp or an LLC taxed as an S Corp must file a tax return independent of anything. So you have to file a tax return. So that is the actual rules. A little FYI, if you're a sole prop, that's why I suggest a lot of people, if there's no legal issue, to operate as a sole prop. Because if you have no transactions, you just don't file, you don't close anything unless you have a seller's permit or something like that, or a business license, but you don't close any registration of the company. You simply start or stop doing business. They're very simple, but these corporations are much more complicated, and you can get yourself down a road you don't want to be in. And as always, if you have any questions or you want me to look up and make sure that your company is for an active, just send an email to Lauren. She'll put you in touch with me, and I'll help you navigate through any situation you may find yourself in. Now, upcoming financial literacy series, I believe that Lauren is putting that information into the chat right now. I also have, should you be charging your customer sales tax, what you need to know. This webinar delves into out-of-state sales as well, because a lot of people have the myth buster, the misconception that if I sell out of state, I don't charge sales tax. That could be true, but may not be. So we go over economic nexus, which came into play, I think it was like 2018, that requires some sales out of state to also charge sales tax. And I just noticed in the chat, Amanda, you don't have to pay any yearly fee for being a sole proprietor, sole prop. You don't. That's another advantage. And that's why I really stress for people to operate as a sole prop until, like I said, they have a legal or a tax reason to do differently. Too many people incorporate when they really don't need to. It's gotten where it's kind of like, I call it the LA Gucci bag. I got an LLC, and it's ridiculous how many people are incorporating these days. And they don't realize that, and this number may not be exact because it's some years old, but when I was studying for my enrolled agent, I was surprised to learn, I was even surprised that about 82% of the companies in the United States operate as a sole prop. If you talk to anybody, they think they're all incorporated. And so too many people are incorporating way too soon. But yes, that's your answer, Amanda, to your question, and you're very, very welcome. Now, upcoming shows, another heads up, next week, we're not going to have a show. It's so close to 4th of July. I knew many of you are going to be on holiday or hangover, I guess I could say. So no show next week, but coming back in July, we have July 12th, Ario's coming back on, and many of you have seen him on the show before. His expertise is marketing, and I asked him to come on and walk through a marketing audit, how to audit your marketing activities and the amount you're spending on marketing to make sure you're getting the proper results. Then on July 19th, we have Delia from DFA Accounting Services come on. She's not only a small business that started her own company, but she's also going to talk about things that she sees in other small companies. So this is the first time that I have somebody that's an accountant coming on, and that's going to be a really interesting show. And speaking of accounting, I've asked Clarissa to come back on, Nerdy Numbers. She's been on a couple times before, a wealth of information on QuickBooks Online, what you need to watch for, how to check the numbers, if you're syncing the data, situations you can get into. So a whole lot of information there. So that brings me to today's show, which I'm really excited about. Emma Green is our guest today, which is also a frequent flyer in the chat. So many of you know her from that. She has extensive experience in starting, growing, and running businesses. She started Quads Physical Therapy in 2008 while still working at a job in the hospital. In October 2019, Emma made the leap to be 100% in her own business. In January of 2022, in response to COVID restrictions, Emma Green Programs LLC was formed, offering online programs and memberships. Emma also coaches other physical therapists looking to create their own business streams. She has also launched 2 books, which she'll tell us more about today. And I have a really interesting subject that Emma and I are going to talk about. But before I get into what we're going to talk about, I want to say, Emma, welcome to the show. It's so good to see you.
Thanks so much, Laurie. It's great to be here. Great to see you too.
I just love having, you in the chat all the time, and now I get to have you on the show. So what Emma and I were talking before the show, and Emma has so much to share, but as I was telling her, and I'll tell the whole story, with my cat and pushing my cat in the stroller, right? I was pushing my cat in the stroller this morning, and I was thinking about Emma coming on the show, and I came up with just this weird thought, and it actually is a little bit of Buddha, and I might say it wrong. So those of you who follow Buddhism, I'm probably messing it up. But one of the things I always think about is this middle of the road concept, because it seems as though there is some truth that when you go down the middle of the road in anything, it seems to bring a little bit more balance and a little bit more happiness and success. And I thought about how so often I see, especially new formed entrepreneurs and small businesses, go from one extreme to another. And Emma, you have seemed to, in my eyes, from observing you, followed the middle of the road. And I would say it wasn't always that way that I sensed that about you. So let's first go back to those who don't know your history. You pick up where you want to. And, when I said this during the beginning of the show before we went live, I thought she's either going to think I'm crazy or she's going to resonate. And the minute I started saying, Emma, I sense a change. I sense something, middle of the road. Is this making sense? And she was shaking her head. She got what I was saying. So Emma, pick up from there and start our story, okay?
Yeah, definitely. I had my physical therapy clinic. It was a brick and mortar clinic, typical physical therapy clinic that most of you have probably been to. And it was growing. I had staff. It was sort of heading in the right direction, but I knew I'd grown it as much as I could by myself. And I knew I needed help to grow further. Now, at this point, I didn't know Laurie. So this is pre-Laurie. And so I looked around, and there were a number of physical therapy clinic business coaches out there. So I thought, I need a business coach. This is what I need. I need to invest in a business coach. They're going to tell me what to do. They're going to tell me how to grow. So I found a business coach that I resonated with. I did a course with him that was all about marketing, and then I joined his mastermind. And so I kind of went all in and, paid all of this money to join this business coach's mastermind. And there were certain things that they definitely made sense, and I could definitely see how it was successful. Didn't always feel quite right to me. But I was like, well, this is how you do it. This is what we do. This is how I should be working. This is what I should be working towards, opening new clinics, getting more staff, and that's what I should be doing. So I kind of went down this road for a while, this I should. And I got to the point where I didn't want to go in my clinic anymore. And I would get to the clinic and I didn't want to be there anymore. And I started to think, what the heck is going on? This is crazy, because I really enjoy what I do. I've been doing what I do for a long, long time. I love my profession. I love my patients. All of a sudden, though, I don't like my own clinic. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And it kind of almost took COVID and lockdown and meeting Laurie and things for me to realize what was going on, because I was so in that moment. I was on that hamster wheel, and I was just on that hamster wheel, spinning my wheels, doing all the things I thought I should be doing. And I realized, oh my goodness, I've created a clinic where I'm actually not happy. That's really not what I wanted to do at all. And so meeting Laurie and getting her input on the financial side of things was pivotal in this. And at the beginning of 2020, I needed to make a move location wise. So we were leaving the location that we'd been for 8 years, moving into a new location. It wasn't quite ready yet, but you know, I needed to go and find somewhere that was going to be a great place for my clinic. And I found this amazing place. And I can remember I had a call with Laurie. I was like, oh, Laurie, I love it. It's exposed brick and there's beams and da-da-da. It's just such great energy. I love it, love it, love it. And Laurie said, well, what are the numbers? And I showed her the numbers. And Laurie said, you can't afford it. And I went, oh, no, but I love it. And so Laurie basically saved me. If you look at the timing there as well, this was January 2020. And Laurie told me, no, don't sign that lease. You can't afford it. And she basically saved my business because obviously, as we know, 6 weeks later, lockdown happened. The physical doors to my practice closed. And had I been tied into that lease, my business would not have survived.
Yeah,
and I think that was huge.
I remember that so well. And, you know, your story resonates with me really around the 2008 recession, because it was at that time when I was a CFO, an interim CFO in a lot of middle-sized companies, you know, 10 to 60 million. And so many went through many, many problems. And after that is when I said, you know what, I just need to rethink my life. And I think COVID was a wonderful aspect for many people. I mean, I'm not saying COVID was good, guys. Don't think I'm saying that. But like everything that's bad, there's some good that came out of it. And I even recognized it at the time. I think it allowed people to throw out the old paradigms, an old word we don't use too much, and rethink where we're wanting to do, what we're actually wanting to do. And not all this should, you know, Anthony Robbins, I think, was the one that used to say you should all over yourself, right? And I've always been one of those that was the should too. And I think if there's anything that we can take forward from this horrific time is a freedom, and I use the word freedom, to determine what we want, not what we necessarily need to be. So Emma, this is where I wanted to go next with this, and it's just a setting off the platform and you jump from there. What I usually see, and you know how often things fall into two ends of the extreme, right? And I see this a lot with entrepreneurs where they get so much into doing it themselves that maybe they miss out on opportunity. They don't want to hire a proper accountant. They don't want to hire a proper lawyer to do some legal documents, things that really are damaging to their company. You know, they may just get into this DIY, download everything, to where they're hurting and harming themselves. Then I have the other extreme where somebody hasn't even proven that a product can be sold, and they're already, and then I'm going to sell it and I'm going to get investors, and they're so here in the cloud with this big dream, they don't realize that a company starts one thing from one thing from one thing, and that's where you go. And that's where I came up with this middle of the road, because, and this kind of connects the story. So when COVID hit, you were on the show before, which, Lauren, if you can find any of the old Emma ones and put in the chat, it's great to kind of retrack some of the things you were telling. But this is the part that I'm just going to pick on, this little aspect. I'll never forget, right after COVID, when you started filming yourself to have your Pilates, and you were saying, well, people are going, did you get a big camera? Did you do this? And you're like, no, I put my chair up on the table and I taped my iPhone. I mean, it was just classic. So where I'm going is, Emma, you seem to have some way of processing now. It's not like you were before this, but I'm noticing this mental processing you do, where you are combining properly the DIY, save money, but knowing when you need to invest and get an expert, and you're doing it on all subjects. So what's going on in your mind that's causing this? Because it's very successful. It's a successful mental strategy that's showing up in your achievements and the decisions you're making. Do you have any clue what's going on inside that you can share with us?
I think certainly mindset shift was huge for me. Realizing that I didn't have to follow somebody else's path. I could decide for myself what I wanted to do. And certainly when lockdown shifted me 100% online, you know, in those early couple of months, I was still planning on going back into the clinic. Of course I was, you know, we were all going back to normal, weren't we? And then obviously as time went
Yeah,
on,
2 weeks.
right, that's it. As time went on and my kids were home and I was dealing with homeschooling and all of the things that came with that, I started to realize that actually I kind of like working from home. I like sitting here in my slippers and talking to my patients through Zoom. I can still do as much with them as I could in the clinic. My practice is very niche, and so that allowed me to be able to do this. I looked at my outcomes with people when I was seeing them in the clinic, and I looked at my outcomes with people when I was working with them online, and they were identical. And I guess the sort of rational business side of me was kind of like, I can save all of that rent that I had been paying out and still get the same results for my patients. It's going to be easier for them. They don't have to travel. They don't have to find parking. They don't have to block off half a day to come and see me. They literally click on and click off, and they can be anywhere. So many of my clients now will still see me while they're on vacation, or they'll see me if they're traveling with work, because they can, and they never used to be able to do that. So there were lots of positive things. And this is something that I have always done as a physical therapist, is I'll turn things around. And so I'll give you an example. I was talking to a patient yesterday, and he came on and he said, I've really flared it up because I was washing the car and wringing out the rag, and I've really flared up my arm. And I said, well, hang on, let's switch that around. You were able to wash your car? That's amazing. 2 weeks ago, you wouldn't have even considered doing that. So I'll always find a positive spin on everything. And I am very much the optimist. I've always been that way. And I think it had been a little bit stifled by trying to follow somebody else's path, trying to do what I should be doing, should. So I think I've almost refound myself and started to allow myself to listen to my own intuition more, rather than what's the next step? What should I do next? What should I do next? That really didn't feel in alignment to me. I think that was a big part of it.
Yep, that makes sense. And it's interesting because going back to this following everybody else's what you think you should do versus your own path, I have seen time and time again that when we just get intuitive, we follow our own path, creativity flows. And when we are doing what we think we should, we block off our energy, our source, whatever you want to say. What do you think? And it's a thought that just came to me as you were speaking, Emma. What do you think causes us to follow other paths, to follow this what we should? To me, I think fear is engaged in there. It's almost like we don't trust ourselves. What's your thoughts on that?
I think, yeah, exactly right. And I think there's a fear of putting ourselves out there. And I know for me, it's a fear of looking foolish, a fear of being laughed at, a fear of being, looking like, oh my goodness, what's she doing? It's a fear of not knowing, I don't really know what I want to do. So I'm going to follow somebody else's guidelines. Yeah. I'm going to follow somebody else's path. And I think that in some ways goes back to school and how we learn in school. This is what you're going to learn, and you follow the curriculum, and there's not a lot allowed in there for your own creativity. And so I think that's how we're brought up. That's the path that we follow. Mm-hmm. But it's so freeing then when you can recognize that and reverse it and start getting that self-trust back and start thinking, what is it that I want to do? What path do I want to follow? And forge your own path.
Let's go back to the technology aspect, because I think this was another interesting thing. When it came to you creating with your iPhone, which turned out to be great quality, you didn't feel like, a lot of times people feel stuck because they go, well, I first got to get this expensive camera and then I got to get somebody to do the videotape. You just started reaching out into different arenas. You got the right platform to launch your classes on. So you use technology and you invested in some areas, but other areas you did it very simple and inexpensive. So you didn't follow this, I'm just going to do everything myself, and you didn't follow, I'm going to pay for the most. You had a really excellent mix of paying for, I think it's Kajabi or something, if I said that right, paying for the platform that wasn't cheap. It wasn't pennies. You didn't use a freebie. You paid for this platform, but then you did your videos yourself on your iPhone. And I think there's some gem there in Emma, how you chose to piece those two together. And I think too many entrepreneurs don't know how to pick when to invest the money into something and when to not, if that makes sense. Any insights on how you came to those decisions?
Yes. Initially, it was very much keep it as simple as I can. And I knew I needed to create these videos, and I knew the people needed the information right now. They couldn't wait for me to save up to buy a camera and all of the rest of that. So I was like, I'm just going to do it. So I set up, as you said, the chair on top of the table. And then I literally had, so this is my planner. You can see it's got the ring binders. So the phone sits in there, and that's how I set it up. I do now have a fancy phone holder that cost me like $25 off Amazon, so I've definitely upgraded there. But that's how I did it initially. And my husband took the kids out for an afternoon, and I filmed, I think, 40 videos that first day, and that was the first half of my program. And I got it out there, and I got it out there. Initially, I was not on Kajabi. I literally was hosting all of the videos unlisted on YouTube. That's free to do. And I had an email provider through my clinic, and I was emailing people out with the YouTube link for that video. Once they'd watched that one, the email provider automatically sent the next one with the next link in. And so as they were watching the videos, they got the next video and the next video. That's how it started. So it didn't cost me any additional money. I was already paying for the email provider, but it didn't cost me any money to create those videos, to upload them onto YouTube, to set up those emails, to get it out to the people who needed it. And so the first half of my program went out like that. And then I had to do the second half of the program because people had gone through the first half and they were asking me for it. I was like, oh my goodness, you need to take the kids out again. I've got to film some more videos. And that was how my program was delivered initially, was just via email with YouTube links in it. And then people started to say, oh, I didn't get this video, or I can't find that one. And it started to get confusing because there's quite a lot. There was a lot of information in there. And so that's when I made the switch to Kajabi. And I looked around to all the different course hosting platforms. I tried a few out. Some felt a bit clunky to me. Some felt that it just wasn't intuitive how to use it for me. Some I didn't like the customer facing, the customer interface. It just wasn't that easy to use. And so I went with Kajabi, which at the time and probably still is the premier course hosting platform. It is not cheap. It is expensive. And that stops a lot of people initially, but I needed it to be robust. I needed to know that it was going to work for me. It was going to hold the platform as I grew and got more and more people coming into the platform. I needed to know that it was going to be there for me, and it has been. So that was a great investment.
See, and this is the part that I love, that I want the audience to really hear, is that you took these incremental steps to show that you, in investment banking, we would say, prove that you had a product, prove that you had a demand, prove that you were able to deliver it. And those are the three things that bankers look for. And so what you did is you had a way of doing that internally, incrementally, in a low cost, no cost solution. And then when you saw it perform, you moved up to the higher cost. And too often people are jumping into the higher cost without proving, because, and I get it, sometimes they feel that they have to look professional, and if they don't do this and etc. And I don't think we live in that kind of world anymore. I mean, if you couldn't hear anybody, etc., that's one thing, but we don't have to have this elaborate photography that we believe. I think we need to kind of look at the world today as if we're trying to go and look at an old paradigm or an old way to follow a should, it doesn't exist in there. We are creating new things and allow that to be open. You know, another area that I think was fascinating that you did very well that I've seen others do very badly, and that is in marketing. And what I have seen a lot, Emma, and I've seen it just so many times, is that people are just throwing money into these Facebook ads or these social media things. And I'm not against any of them, but I'm into finance. I'm into return on investment, right? So they're just like taking everything they can and they're just throwing all this money and they're hoping. And I have seen some people just get caught incrementally where then they're spending this tons of money. And I wish I could say I've only seen it once, but I'm seeing probably 75% of the money spent during the pandemic on social media yielded little to no results. You didn't do that. You were very intelligent in how you chose. So can you talk about the marketing? Because after you sent these videos to your existing client, you have successfully built quite a client base. I'm not going to go into any more. I'm going to let you talk about that. So let's chat about the wisdom you used in that area.
Yes. If I, again, go back pre-Lori, I had dabbled in Google Ads with the business coach that I was working with. And exactly that. I was spending hundreds of dollars a month and getting nothing back at all. And I think I didn't do it for very long. You know, some people will probably say, well, that was why, you know, you need to be doing it for 6 months before you see a return.
Exactly. I've heard that.
Right. So, so I probably feel like I was a little burned by that. And so therefore, very, very cautious about Facebook ads, Google ads, all of these different social media marketing elements. And I didn't do it that way. I grew organically and built a community. And that was the biggest thing. So I have a Facebook group for tennis elbow sufferers.
I'm going to interrupt you right here. Hold on.
Yeah.
Lauren, catch that. Grew organically and created a community. I'm sorry, Emma, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that was so beautifully said. I had to capture that. Keep going, please.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. So I started a Facebook group on for tennis elbow sufferers for my patients initially, because what I was realizing was, and again, this is pre-pandemic, just before the pandemic, I was realizing I was treating people, but they were very much in isolation. And there is a big therapeutic effect from that socialization and realizing it's not just you, other people are in a similar situation and you can get through it. And so I built this Facebook group for my clients. And so I invited them in and they came in and, you know, and it was great. It was working really well because there were people in there who had tennis elbow in the past and now we're completely fine and we're back playing the drums or playing field hockey or, you know, whatever it was. And others coming in at the beginning of their journey could see their success. So it was great. But then what started happening is people from all over the world started joining. And so now I have 2,500 people in this Facebook group from all over the world. And so, and that is pure, that is without Facebook ads, that is without any kind of paid marketing, that is purely organic. And the biggest thing with regards to creating that is consistency. I post every single day and just being there for the group, answer questions, giving value. When you give value, people start to know, like, and trust you. People are not going to buy anything from you until they know, like, and trust you. So building that community, giving great value, and it just grows from that.
Now, what was interesting is then the next conversation I had with you, you're like in all of these different, I'm going to call them just events, but then you've got this person inviting you to, I'm not going to say what, but you know what I'm talking about, his association, and then you're writing this book and you got this and that. So suddenly it seemed like the relationships that you were creating were really taking you down pathways that were beyond what you would have even imagine. Talk about those.
Yes. I think it almost goes back to basics, to sort of like getting out into your community and talking to people and creating those relationships. And so as my community grew, I started to get people say, oh, my friend has a golf podcast, you should talk to him. Or my friend has a tennis podcast, you should talk to them. And I started to get these requests. And then I was asked to speak at the tennis summit. And I've now done that for the last 2 years. And there's 20,000 tennis players that attend this virtual tennis summit every year. It's phenomenal. And so it started to grow that way. And I realized there's so many different ways that you can get your message out there. And it was tapping into those different relationships. But I knew I still needed to get the information out there in different ways. Not everybody's on Facebook. Not everybody listens to podcasts. And so I decided again during the pandemic, I wasn't taking my kids to and from school. I've got 10 hours a week of my time back. And what am I going to do with it? So once I've created my course, I then converted the course into the book. So my book was released in April of 2021, Tennis Elbow Relief. And then at the end of 2022, I forget now. It was, yes, at the end of 2022, it was admitted to the World Tennis Library at Wimbledon in London. And so all of these different things just started to happen. And it does go back to relationships and talking to people and being out there. And again, just giving value and wanting to help people. How can I help you be successful? How can I help your audience? And it just grows your own online presence and your own business.
Emma, this is a really weird question, but maybe you won't think it's so. And I was going to go in one direction, but I got to ask this question. One of the things that comes to mind is when I talked to you before and you were looking at going into that lease space, you always have had this bubbling personality. That's who you are, right? But today and ever since then, you're beyond bubble, okay? You're radiating. And the word that comes to mind all the time, Emma, is you just seem to be having a...
Oh, I think we lost Laurie there. But I think I kind of know where she was going with that. Oh, she's coming back. Are you there, Laurie? Oh, you've muted yourself.
Okay, hold on. Fine. Are you okay now?
Yeah, I can hear you. There you are.
Okay, I told you guys we made this for a little bit. I don't see you yet, Emma, but we're going to keep going. But I think it's that you had a lot of fun. Fun, and I've noticed like when people are having fun, they seem to have, I just say success radiates towards them, success gets drawn towards them. How much do you think just being the fact that you're having so much fun started opening up all these angles? I know that's not a business question, but it just dawned on me as you were speaking.
Yeah, I think it's made a huge difference. And it starts to get a little bit woo-woo. And, if you'd have talked to me about woo-woo things 20 years ago, I'd have been like, no, this is definitely not me at all. But I've started to embrace the woo for sure. Sort of vibrational energy. I definitely believe there is certainly something within that. And I think, things that vibrate at a higher energy, if you're happy, if you're joyful, you're going to attract those things. Whereas if you're not, you're going to attract the opposite. And I think that also comes back to the optimistic outlook, finding the positives in lots of things and being able to flip that around. Somebody can tell you the same story and there can be two totally different sides of that story. I'll give you an example from my recent vacation. So we recently went on vacation. This was for a big birthday of mine and a trip of a lifetime. And we got to LAX at like crazy time in the middle of the night almost. And then we'd been there for 3 or 4 hours because we were super early. And then the plane was delayed by 5 hours. We missed our connection. So we actually didn't get to where we needed to be until the following day. And so we had this unexpected layover in Miami. And so we made the most of it. We went out in Miami, out in South Beach that night, had an amazing time. And my husband and my son had actually said, oh, I really wish we were having a layover in Miami. And there you go. What you kind of put out to the universe, you've got to be prepared to get back. And so we ended up with this layover in Miami that we were never expecting, had an amazing night in Miami, and then got to our final destination the following day. Or you could have looked at that as, oh, we got delayed. Oh, we missed our connection, doom and gloom and everything else. And we just didn't. We just turned it into a very positive experience. So I think outlook, mindset is huge. And what you put out, you are going to get back.
I do too. My latest saying has, I do not have to control the flow of life. That's my newest thing. I say it all the time when sometimes I go, I do not have to control the flow of life, and it makes a major difference. So one end, I wanted to go to the other one now, but I'm going to say it this way with a sentence like in between, but you didn't go the cheap route on everything. When it came time to assess the legal structure for your company, given your physical therapy, you spent money assessing that. So let's talk about the other end, because we talked about the DIY and all these clever things. You then had certain times where you were like, oh no, I'm getting a lawyer and I'm getting good advice. What allowed you to then switch your mindset and say, this is where I spend money? Because that's what I see so special about what you did, Emma. You gracefully, with ease, went back and forth between investing where you should, being clever where you could do it on your own. So give us some insight into how you made that decision.
I think this, again, it starts pre-Lori, when I was first setting up my physical therapy business. And so this is, years ago, we're talking 2008, and I I should set up my business. And so I set up an LLC, not knowing that as a physical therapist, I can't be an LLC in California. But I went on to Rocket Lawyer. I did it myself. I set it all up. And it kind of, all the names I was putting in for my physical therapy business, it's like, oh, you can't have that. That sounds professional. I'm like, well, duh, of course it sounds professional. What are they saying? I didn't have the knowledge to know that I couldn't do that. So I spent the money on Rocket Lawyer, and I set up my LLC. A few months later, found out that I actually can't have an LLC as a physical therapist. Spent the money to have the dissolution of my LLC. And so I learned that lesson. I basically paid to create and dissolve an LLC rather than paying a lawyer who would have done the right things in the first place. So that was definitely very much the voice of experience. I realized that, no, there are certain things that I need to pass over to people who know what they're doing and know what they're talking about. So right now I'm working with a lawyer to trademark my logo, and on some copywriting things as well with regards to the course, my books, the content, that type of thing as well.
Yeah. What people don't realize is the Rocket Lawyer and the Legal Zoom and all they're doing is filing documents, and you're kind of controlling the ship. And if you don't understand where you're going with it, you're going to end up down the road. And a lot of times they don't tell you what documents you have to file. I see a lot of people get in trouble with that. So it's really, the takeaway is there's time to invest money, and it's usually the accounting and the legal aspects, because those are the two you can get in trouble with really quick. And the other ones, you can be clever on your own. So Emma, I just to see you and you were successful with your brick and mortar, but in my mind, I see you today as so successful because you're doing what you love, and it seems like the sky is open to you. Opportunity is open, where before you were kind of like going down this pathway. Today, if you told me Emma's, over in this other country doing this, I would not be surprised. You seem to be just resonating with a whole different frequency of the way you're doing business, and it's changed your company, it's changed your way of being. And so that's what I see. I want to throw the floor out to you, to anything you want to say to the audience, or, you know, say, Laura, you're crazy. No, you're out there on the woo-woo, because I know I've gotten more woo-woo in the last couple of years than I ever used to be. But give me your thoughts on what you think your future is, and what you could share with everybody.
Yeah, I love that. I definitely embrace the woo. I'm totally with you, Laurie. I have a morning routine that includes meditation and journaling, as well as exercise and, you know, kind of planning my day. But you know, meditation has been used for thousands of years because people know that it makes them feel better. And now we're starting to understand why, because the medical research is now starting to show us why these things are working. And so, you know, we can see the biochemical changes in the brain and even anatomical changes in the brain that meditation can produce. And it's incredibly beneficial. So I teach my patients to use meditation to help with chronic pain, but I meditate every day. Now, I'm not in pain. I don't have chronic pain, but I meditate every day because I know it's so good for my brain health. And it's really interesting when I don't do it, my days don't go as well. I don't have as good a day as when I've set myself up with meditation first thing, and it can be as quickly, like 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be a, you know, big long thing. 5 minutes is plenty and is effective. And then journaling. I started journaling just before I left the hospital in 2019. And it's, again, it's something that you can just get your thoughts out and onto paper. And again, it can really help to clarify your mindset as to where you're heading. But I think it also gives you kind of that release, and it helps to kind of keep you focused. I've definitely found that's really helpful. And again, not for very long. I have a little notebook and I write 1 page every day. And again, if I don't do it, I miss it. And so a morning routine like that, relatively short amount of time, relatively simple, but it sets me up for the day, and it sets me up to be more successful.
You know, that makes sense what you're saying, because the word that comes to mind with you, Emma, is I feel like you have a clarity about you that you didn't have before. You have a very set path. You know where you're going. And I have to say that I agree with you. I meditate all the time, and I feel like I have to, because my mind, I've got a very strong brain, and it just can go blah, 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 blah. And if I don't sit it down and say, okay, let's organize these thoughts in single file, I can get out there with just being all over, and I don't feel like I'm in the now. I'm all over the place, and I get so I think those are wonderful words. But I think at the end of the day, what is needed for success in life, and especially in business, is clarity. And that's what it sounds like that you're getting your hands on, if you will. Hands on, no pun intended, physical therapist, but you're getting your hands on clarity.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think if we have clarity, then we're happy. I mean, there's nothing that's more uncertain. If you don't have clarity, you don't know what you're doing, and that doesn't feel good. So I think you're absolutely right.
So where do you, so at the last thoughts, what's your plans or dreams or thoughts? What's Emma going to get her hands into next? What do you see in the next coming future for you?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I've just taken a week off, and this is the first time in, I can't even remember how long, I've actually had a week off, because being virtual, I can work wherever I go. And so I would go to Hawaii and I would still be teaching my classes, and I'd go to the UK, I'd still be seeing patients. And so I took a week off. I actually took my laptop with me on vacation. It never came out of my bag, which I'm kind of proud about. But I got back, and I had money come into my bank account every single day that I was away. And I came back to thousands more in my bank than I had when I left. And we actually had our busiest week in the clinic. I say in the clinic, obviously it's virtual. Our busiest week last week. We've been trying to hit certain goals. We have goals and targets. We've been trying to hit these goals for probably 2.5 years now. Well, we were busier last week than we've been since pre-pandemic, and it's continuing this week. It's continuing next week. So don't be afraid to take time off is the other thing. I think that's another very powerful thing that can really help with your clarity, because if you're just in that daily grind, in that hustle, you're just on, sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees. And just taking that time off, giving yourself that allowing yourself that time to just, there was a time I was lying in a hammock by the beach with a book. And it was just amazing. And just to allow you, and it wasn't a business book, it was a fiction book. And to allow yourself that time is incredibly beneficial. But I'm going to be working on the second edition of my first book. That is coming out very soon. So I'm quite excited about that. And promoting my classes more, getting more people into the classes, helping more people. I'm going to be going back to the UK at the end of the year, hoping to get the second edition of the book into the World Tennis Library at Wimbledon again there. So yeah, and helping physical therapists all over the world as well. I'm, all these different countries that we can now reach because of being able to work virtually. It's huge. The community around the world is just phenomenal to tap into. And it's just, there's so many opportunities. So yeah, take the opportunities that you see, but also take time to rest as well.
I think that was wonderful words of wisdom that you have given us through the entire show, like always. And one of the things I've been saying lately is, let's take our life back. Let's take control back. Let's redesign and rethink what we are, what we want to experience. No more shoulds, no more, oh, it's done this way or anything. You know what? Let's let COVID end on a good note and give us the ultimate freedom. Let's go from lockdowns to the ultimate mental and behavioral freedom and create our desires, and do it with clarity and do it with relaxation. I mean, isn't that the ultimate? Thank you so much, Emma. Lauren, I'm not sure if you're able to come back. We made it through except for one little situation with the Wi-Fi, so we've achieved having pretty much a whole interview. So Lauren, are you able to come and talk to us at all? You withheld the Wi-Fi either way. No, I don't think she is, but you know what? Oh, maybe, Lauren?
I can talk, but for some reason my camera still isn't working.
Hey, that's okay, because you held on to the Wi-Fi. The show is Wi-Fi hosted with Lauren, so she couldn't talk, but she got us through it. So I'm going to say thank you to Emma. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lauren, for hanging in there. Thank you to all of our wonderful audience that was here today. I know Lauren has been putting things into the chat and keeping up on it. So Emma, of course, I'm going to have you back on, because every single time I have you back on, you have so many more stories to tell. And I feel as though you're not only giving business advice, but you're really figuring out how to design a life, how to design a business, how to design a life, how to have that childlike excitement in business. And I think that's what we have to hold on to, that childlike excitement. I have always said, if it's not fun, I'm not doing it. And I think there's some truth to that. So Emma, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Emma, Lauren, thank you. Lauren, thank you for holding the fort up for us. And remember, next week we won't be here, but everybody join us the following week. We're going to go through a marketing audit to talk about the same thing that Emma was talking about, people investing way too much money in marketing and not getting results. And to the audience, thank you for hanging in there when we had a little bit of Wi-Fi, but that's how we do things. We just roll. We're not needing to control the flow of life. So thank you, everybody, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.